Pacelli, while he was nuncio in Germany, lived on ground zero. He was surrounded by hostile forces. He was infiltrated by spies and still managed to save Jewish lives, which were not part of his flock. But this was his responsibility as a Christian to take care of the roots of Christianity, the Jewish world. How the world came to change its opinion of him is outrageous.
Every rectory, every convent, every school throughout Rome became a sanctuary for Jews. There's all kinds of interesting stories. I've talked to people who were in some at the time. I've got photographs. Not only are people sleeping in every room and every hallway, they're sleeping in the stairways, going up and down the stairways. Food is being shipped all over the place to feed all these people.
Pacelli, at that time, it was Cardinal Pacelli, wrote to 65 apostolic nuncios and bishops around the world, asking for 200,000 visas, and he called them non-Aryan Italians. They had every code name you can imagine, because the Concordat that was signed with Germany enabled the church to save converted Jews. They used the network of the Roman Catholic Church to save Jewish lives. Everybody criticizes the Vatican for the Concordat. 30 days before it was actually approved by the Vatican, 30 days before, the Jews of Palestine signed a Concordat with the Nazi government. And this was in terms of bringing Jewish immigration from Palestine and what the terms were going to be. Are you telling me that the Jews of Palestine recognize the Nazi regime? This is the worst part, is that they say that they recognize the Nazi regime. No, they didn't do that. They had a diplomatic relations with Germany, as they did with Tokyo. The Vatican does not sign concordats with friendly nations. For example, there's no concordat with the United States and the Vatican, never was. All the friendly nations. The Vatican only signs this with adversarial relationships, and what it does is set forth the rights of the church within that country.
They say that, in Rome they saved about 8,000 Jews that way, and had one of the highest percentages of anywhere people being saved.
We have, for example, the Valkyrie attempt on Hitler's life, 1944. We have the documents of the Kaltenbrunner report. It names Pacelli and his secretary Lieber as co-conspirators. Why? Because they were. They actually said that they would not interfere to negotiate a peace unless Hitler was dead.
The Pope wrote a letter to be read throughout Poland. The bishop in charge, Sophia, read the letter, went over and burned it, wrote a letter back to the Pope, said, "Holy Father, thank you so much. This is wonderful. We'll never forget your wishes, but this will get people killed." The free speech had been suppressed. The Pope's statement isn't going to help. It's going to make things worse because the Nazis control the press.
Stalin despised him because he opposed him. The fact is that we have documentation from the United States with the American ambassador to the Holy See asking, with the British and the Americans corresponding, saying, we must encourage the Pope not to speak out against what's going on with the Nazis. Why? Because they knew they would have to speak out against the atrocities committed by the Russians. And he knew that would hurt the Allied cause. And so they encouraged him not to speak out, which he complied with. But again, he despised the notion of communism, and he despised the notion of godless countries. And so he was the enemy, the supreme enemy.
The chief rabbi of Rome converted to Catholicism, took Eugenio as his first name. That was the Pope's Christian name, as thanks. In 1955, the Israeli Philharmonic came to Rome to play a concert of tribute and thanks for all the church had done, posed with Pius XII for a photograph. These things wouldn't happen with Franco or someone who really was opposed to the Jews. A lot of people consider Pope Pius XII to have been really a cold warrior, someone who very clearly was affirmative in his actions against the spread of communism. I mean, he saw what communism did, not just to the Catholic Church, to all religions, wherever it went. It persecuted the churches, it persecuted Christians, other people of faith, and was a very dangerous thing. He recognized that, and he did not want to see that spread. He knew what communism meant, and it brought the church to its knees wherever it was, brought people to their knees, and he did not want that to happen. He was hailed at the liberation of Rome, at the end of the war, at the time of his death in 1958. There are letters that the Holy See was inundated with letters and tributes and thanks and stuff, and everyone, and that's 1958. By 1963, he's a villain. How does that happen? Well, it happens because it was an orchestrated campaign. The initial attempt to discredit Pope Pius XII, Moscow Radio, I think in 1945, referred to him as Hitler's Pope, first use of that term. But the real prosecutions began not with the Pope, but with Cardinal Wyszynski in Poland, Stepinac in Croatia, Mindszenty in Hungary, Borand in former Yugoslavia. There are all these local priests and bishops and other religions as well who are prosecuted, who have to be subdued in order for the Soviet Union to inculcate its new values in these areas. A little bit later on, late 1950s, Khrushchev decides, you know, we're going to go after the next guy, who's someone who's dead, and we're going to do it in this kind of neat way. The other leaders we could capture physically. We had courts we could control. We could manufacture evidence, and we could jail them. Now you can't do that with a pope. We don't have possession of them. We don't have a trial. We don't have those things. But what can we do? Well, we can make a fictional story. A fictional story that has this beautiful element to it. You can disprove all kinds of different aspects of it. And I could say, well, yeah, of course, but it's fictional. It's just the core of it is true. And you know, really, it's the truth. You say, but this is wrong, this is wrong. Yeah, you're right, but it's really true. The theater where it opened was a theater that was designed expressly to produce pro-communist propaganda. The producer who brought it to the stage there in Berlin, that he had devoted his life to doing that. The translators, the publishers of the books, the producer on Broadway, all these folks who have these communist ties, including many who wrote reviews and promoted the play or the book in other ways. There's this enormous web. Suddenly the Soviet Union had control over nations that had been historically very Catholic. If you plug in, it's not just a play, but it's the whole Soviet disinformation mechanism behind the play that's promoting the play, doing books about the play, having the play translated and produced, and making kids in high school in the Soviet Union and other satellite nations go see it each year. So it's not just a little play, it's all these things coming together that suddenly really this profound propaganda, and you can't really disprove it because every time you point out errors in it, say, well, yeah, it's fiction, but it's really true.